I'm here to talk about rubber molding today. I'm one of the old school people. I like to use the Castaldo Gold label. I think it's because when I worked in industry in the 80s, I was using molds that were by Castaldo Gold label that were made in the late 1800s, and they were still viable and working. I know a lot of people today are using silicone, but I like to teach this process because, first of all, a mold frame and a mold like this might be $3 to $4, whereas if we were making it out of silicone, it would be $20 to $25. And silicone's only been around about 20 years, so are they going to last into the next century? I don't know. It's just kind of my thing. I learned to use it. I like the low cost for my students, and I like the fact that it has incredible durability. So what we're going to be doing is vulcanized rubber, which is how tires are made for cars. We're going to put layers of this rubber together, and we're going to put it underneath the vulcanizer, and it's going to push it down and it's going to melt it together, and then we'll be cutting it open to be able to then shoot the waxes. So the first thing you need to do is you need to have a sprue and a button. So what we're using is an 1/8 inch. This is a piece of tubing which will work, and it fits inside the sprue, and this sprue profile is the same as the wax pot, so that you inject into it and it gives you a straight shot into your model that's in there. And so you'll be wanting to solder this 1/8 inch onto your piece, and we are going to be using robins today. There's a really beautiful fabricated piece that looks like a quilt pattern that she's going to use for her linkage project. Really excited about that. One of the things you should notice is where the sprue is soldered, we forged it flat a little bit so that it's the same thickness as going into the model. So that's one of the important things when you get ready to rubber mold your project. Let me help you make sure that we've got a good sprue system and everything's going to work right. With rubber molding, we're shooting wax into this mold, so it works with the same laws of physics as our investment molds are, that we want a straight shot in, we want it to easily clean up, and we want a long enough sprue on it so we're not having to sprue each item, which will really speed up the process for you on that. So what you need to know is you need to have space around. So I would say that you need about 3/8 of an inch on each side. You need at least a 1/2 inch on the top here. I've had students who didn't have those measurements and they shot the wax right out the back side of the mold. If these mold frames don't work for you, we can make them. I've made them out of copper tubing before. There are ways we can do that. So this is the way of looking at it on from the front. The second thing that you need to pay attention to is the width. So I'm going to pull this out, set it up on top for Erin to look at, and notice that I've still got about 1/4 of an inch on each side. If I used a thinner one, like this one, when I go to shoot the wax and I hold the mold together, I may collapse the cavity, and then you're not going to get a good casting because the wax won't fill properly. So finding the right size, you can see we've got the different varying sizes here, is also pretty important for the mold frame. The other thing I want to say is that you want to have a little bit of a sprue hanging out the bottom, because what that's going to do is that's going to fit into this 1/8 inch hole, and it's going to keep it right where we need it. The other thing you have to do before I help you with it is you need to have a drawing for me, and it doesn't have to be a fancy drawing, but what I need to know to help you cut the mold open, because we can't see in it after we've molded it, is I need to see where it is in the mold frame, and I need to see it from the front. And then even more important is the side, because I need to know where I need to cut. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be dividing the mold up the center of the sprue and button, and then when we get up to the top, I'm going to move over and I'm going to cut along that back edge, because that'll leave a parting line which will be easy to clean up. And then once I get about 1/4 of an inch past that, I'm going to zigzag so that the mold frame fits together. So that's the way we're going to cut it open. Looking at it from the front, we're going to come in and we're going to cut down in and we're going to zigzag, and what you're going to end up with is all the way around your model is going to be flat because we're cutting up that straight seam. But on the outside we're going to put some waves. We'll call them blue waves today because of the election, and that's what locks it together. Some people put just a couple of notches in all four corners. I was taught by a really talented mold maker at Mayer Brothers to do it with the waves, and I find that it links them better together. So the cutting open will be a whole nother video. I just want to talk to you that if you don't have these drawings for me, I'm going to have to be trying to cut your mold open with you in the dark. So bring me a mold frame picture, and then we can get working on molding this. So this is the way the Castaldo comes, and it comes with a cloth back, which is yellow, and then it comes with this blue. I call it waffle stompers. That's me from the 70s, being a mountaineer hiking. And that just keeps it, the stickiness, so that when you get ready to take these off, that everything sticks together pretty well. What you're going to do after you've chosen your mold frame, gotten your sprue and everything ready, is you're going to set it up and you're going to draw lines along here. And instead of making you endure going through all of that, then we're just going to take some scissors and we're going to cut the rubber apart. And then we're going to be stacking it so that it's at least one high on the mold. Okay, so we've gone ahead and pre-prepped that. And so when you're thinking about the mold, I like to draw this for you. We're looking at it from the side, and here's my button, here's my sprue, this is a really beautiful piece. It's going to be a nice locket, but it's going, linkage, but it's also going to be a really straightforward mold to cut open, so that you guys can learn a simple one before we get more involved in Cass's skull. But think about the layers. These are layers of the rubber that are laying in here, and can you see that I have to cut away a little bit here and here for the mold? And when I think about this, I think about the first time I had a CAT scan of my brain, and they do the slices of the sides of what you're looking for. So like these here really only have a little notch out the bottom. And then when we get to this center one, this one we're gonna have to have something that looks like this, that's a hole in it to put it together. And I think that we have that over here, right here for you to look at. So Robin's done a great job getting this ready to go. One of the things that I want to tell people is this is not like soldering where everything has to fit together really well. We have the ability to stick extra pieces of rubber in if we cut away too much. And so you don't have to be so particular about cutting the mold open. The other thing that she did that I think is smart is she put another one that fits inside, because there is a raised edge all the way around this. And we want to make sure that the rubber is really compressed and melted in to pick up this beautiful pattern that's on here. So what we're going to do, if I've not got this all messed up, is we're going to pack this, and I call this dry packing. And what I mean by that is before we take the blue and the gold off, I want to just put everything together and make sure it looks right. And then when I feel confident about that, we'll be taking the paper off. You need to leave the gold on the outside of both, and so perfect. Doesn't matter if these are this way or this way in the process. We just need to leave the gold label fabric on it so that we don't melt the blue plastic all over the vulcanizer, and you'll see that in a moment. So I'm going to start assuming that from the bottom there was nothing really cut out of these because she didn't need to. So I'm going to put the two bottom ones in, and then I can see that actually a third one needs to be underneath there. So can you see how I've slipped that in? And now this is laying pretty flat. I can see that there's some concern in here. We're going to use these scraps and fill those in, but I want to check and make sure that everything's looking right. Turn it around. There we go. There we go. And then you want one layer above, because we want to make sure that there's extra rubber to push down in and really mold around those beautiful details that are on this linkage project. So I'm pretty confident that Robin did a perfect job on this. So I'm going to open it up. I'm going to flip these out. I'm going to start at the bottom, and I'm going to take the blue off, and it's a little sticky. And then I'm going to take the next one off, and what I like to do is I like to count how many layers I have and make sure that I've got the same amount of blue paper when I'm done, because if you don't take these papers off, they won't melt together, and then you'll have to make a new mold, and that'll cost you $3. So, okay, so I'm gonna count my layers. Going to make sure that I've got them off. I'm going to be 2 more blues than the yellows, because I'm leaving the yellows on the outside. If you forget that, we can put the yellow back on it, but we can't do anything about it if you haven't taken the blue off. So, okay. So at this point, what I want to do is I want to come in and make sure I got that down in there. Okay. It's a little loose in here, but I think we'll be okay. Now I'm going to take some of the scrap, and I'm going to make sure that I've got all the yellow off and all the blue off the scrap. Even these tiny little pieces will inhibit the mold from filling in. And you can see I just kind of stuffed it down in there. The first time I did this, it reminded me of the first time I did sheetrock, and I had made the sheetrock fit so well there was no place for the mud to fill in. So I learned my lesson that I didn't have to be that particular, but do get those scraps off. So now I'm ready to continue on, and like I said, it doesn't matter if yellow to yellow is together or blue to blue. What's most important is to get all of this off. And then Erin just reminded me, for safety precautions, we're going to put this layer in. So I'm going to drop that in there. Okay. And then I'm going to not get any of that in here. Check and make sure everything's okay. Do I have it the right way, or is it the other way around? This isn't completely symmetrical. The good news is, did I have it in the first way? There we go. Yep, so there's more on one side than the other. Put that back in there. Say goodbye to this beautiful piece. I've got the tape off of that piece that I'm going to fill in where the button is. And now I'm going to just continue filling this in. And the last one, I'm going to leave the yellow on, and I'm going to put it right on top. And just to make sure, I'm going to flip it over and make sure that I've got some sticking out, and it's actually sticking out on both sides, which is great. And then just to count, I've got 6 blues and I've got 4 yellows. So I know that I've gotten everything out of this mold, which is really important, because I can show samples of students who forgot and it didn't laminate and it just came apart. But we are all ready to go. Just a couple of things I do want to say. Make sure that you work in a really clean environment, because you don't want to pick up any metal filings or dust or dirt into the rubber, because we want a really perfection of the surface of your model, so that when we shoot the waxes, we get a really good clarity of your design that's on there. So now what I need to do is I need to measure this, and I know that this is 3/4 of an inch. And it's always really important whenever you're using any kind of rubber molding material, whether it's silicone or the gold label or the white label, that you read the instructions, because they all have different melting temperatures and they all have a different time for heating. But this Castaldo yellow or gold, it's at 20 minutes per half inch. So if I do my math, this is going to take 30 minutes to heat. So let's walk over to where the vulcanizer is. I'm going to take this extra piece just in case, probably won't need it, but I think that was pretty clear on how to pack that mold. Great. So here we are over where the wax pot is. I worked in industry and my job was to shoot all the waxes and cut all the waxes when I worked in industry. You want to have it in a clean environment, and even though we have a small studio, I've kind of tucked it over in this corner so that we're not going to get a lot of dirt and dust from the other things that we do in the studio. This is our vulcanizer, and we had to replace it a couple years ago because someone did not keep the two jaws together in heating, and it warped these, ouch, which are warm now, and we couldn't tighten it down anymore. So you've seen my lousy writing on here, please close all the way when finished, because even when you turn this off, it's still, if you leave it open, it'll warp. So what we do is we've got our vulcanizer instructions here, preheat at 325. So we've got this at 325. This takes about a half hour to get up to temperature. So when you come in, you want to turn this on. And when the yellow light goes off, it means it's up to temperature and we're ready to go. 20 minutes per half inch. I know that this is 3/4 of an inch. So we've got a half hour. And what we need to do is put it in here, tighten it down. When we get 10 minutes into it, we're going to come back and we're going to tighten it down again, because by then the rubber is going to start to get squishy and we'll be able to push it into all the cavities that are in there. So one of the things that I like to do is I like to take these aluminum plates, because you can see people have melted the blue, and we don't really want to damage those plates that are in there. So I'm going to set this like this and this in, so that even though I know I've done it the right way, this will keep students from doing it the wrong way. And then now, you notice I don't have this bolted down, and everybody goes, why don't you have it bolted down? And I said, because I've seen too many students tighten this down so tight when it's bolted down that they crush their model and their mold, and then they wonder why their waxes don't turn out right. So I've left it loose. In your own studio, you can bolt it down. But I'm going to open this up with this beautiful cast iron wheel that has parting lines in it because it was sand cast. Sorry, I can't help myself. And then I'm going to slide this in, and I'm going to put it, ouch, right under, and try not to burn myself. Okay. And now I'm going to tighten it back down, and I always like the sound of the air coming out of it. Hear it. And if you look down underneath here, I've bottomed out, and what bottom out means is that the two plates are already down onto my metal frame, my aluminum frame, so there won't be anything to squish down in there. So I'm going to open this back up, and thank you, Robin, for leaving it that way so we can fix it. And I'm going to pull this out, and I'm going to pull this one out, and I'm going to take the yellow off of this. And the reason why these frames are made out of aluminum is they heat up really fast, so this is already warm. And I'm going to take the blue and pull this off. And so if you're not sure what I mean about bottoming out, ask me. But I'm going to put this maybe back up in there. So it's always a little bit of a pain when you have to come back in and do it, but it's really important that you do, otherwise you won't get complete mold process. There we go, thank you, Erin. And this guy's not quite hot yet, so I can slide him in there with my bare hands. I've been told I have asbestos fingers. I think it's just calluses. So I'm going to tighten it down. And now when I look, I see that I can still see some rubber between the plate up top and my frame. And so I'm going to tighten it just a little bit more. And then I'm going to leave it for 10 minutes. And I'm going to come back and I'm going to tighten it again. So in these next 10 minutes, this is going to heat up the rubber to where it's like silly putty. And then I'll tighten it a little bit more. If it bottoms out at that point, it's good enough because I know we packed it well enough. But in the first time around, you want to make sure that you've got some of that raised up so that it's gonna fill down in there really well. So you can see that the light came back on. That's because the temperature has cooled down a little bit because we opened and closed it. That's okay. We're gonna be fine with the 20 minutes per half inch. So I'm looking at it now, it's 5 to 12. So at 5 after, we're gonna come back here and tighten it up just this way. Don't tighten it down too much because you don't want to crush things. That's why it's not bolted down. And then we can leave it until we've done our 30 minutes. What I do want to say is if you leave it in here too long, you can make it turn into, it never sets up. You can overcook it. So really paying attention to the time is really critical. And I'll count on you, Erin, and I to watch what time it is. And then I'll show you when we pull it out what we're going to do. I'm going to take the scalpel. I'm going to find the center of the sprue. You guys could be over here if you want to be in the picture, but it's just my hands. And I was so happy to have blue today. So I'm going to come just straight across, go down in just a, maybe a 3/16 of an inch, not a 1/4 inch. And then I'm going to come straight out, and that's going to give me that flat area. And then I'm going to zigzag. And when I'm doing this, I'm going down the same depth across. I don't want to do this. I want to be at the same depth as I go down because I don't want to run into something unexpected. So I've come back in, pulling it open, and I'm cutting it again, and I'm zigzagging. And if you can't get good hills and valleys, it's because you're not bending your elbow in and out enough. Okay, so I'm down about like that. If I do one more, I'll probably be okay, but at this point, if I just do this one side, I can get lost. So what I want to do now is I want to turn and I want to cut from the other side. So when I'm cutting this mold, I want to be cutting it even on both sides. So now I'm going to come in and I'm going to cut out and I'm going to zigzag and I'm going to do it one more time. And you notice that I'm the same depth the whole way. I want to see if I can straighten this up and if I can take the button off, because sometimes it's nice to be able to see where the button isn't. Come on, buddy. Come on. Sometimes the buttons come off and sometimes they don't. This one isn't, but I can at least now see down underneath. And so I'm going to spread this open, I'm going to cut, and I'm still on your sprue. So on this side, when we look, see, I'm still on the sprue. But what I'm looking for now is to find which side is your open, you know, the top and the bottom. And I'm not there yet, so I got a ways to go. Normally I would have lovely Robin doing this side, but she didn't want to be in the picture. Your hands have to look better than mine.
I don't know about that.
My mom, when I was in my 20s, goes, God, your hands look bad. They look worse than mine. It's gotta go because I use them. So I'm just coming in, cutting that little bit out. I'm trying to stay the same depth. And the zigzags are going to lock everything together. If you pull the mold too much, you can get a bigger parting line. So I try not to. There we go. I just found your piece. And that's the back. That's good. So now I'm just going to cut straight out. I'm going to cut this way, straight out. Can you see? Now I'm on the back. I'm going to put my blade right on the back. I'm going to come out a 1/4 of an inch. And then I'm still going to try to put a zigzag in there. And I'll do it again, being level as I cut. Now can you see that this is starting to stress this side? So I want to come over from this side and I want to cut out, and I want to get down to the same level as the other side. Okay, now I need to raise this up a little bit and you can see the detail on it. I never take my model out until I'm past it. So what I need to do now, and you always start in the center. If I start on the end, I might not end up here. So I'm going to start in the center again. I'm going to go down that 1/4 of an inch and I'm going to zigzag out. And then I'm going to come and I'm going to do it from the other side. And I really appreciate using this one because this is a nice simple mold. Can you see now I'm still about the same level on both sides as I'm cutting. I can't ruin this mold now, so now what I can do is I can pull this out. And if you're a good mold maker, you won't have any marks on your model. So far so good. And you can see the detail on it is pretty beautiful. Someone would say to me, should you just leave it like this? And you can, but because I'm doing these zigzags, the mold's going to fit together every time properly. What I found, if I don't cut the mold all the way in half, I have a hard time getting the wax out. Okay, so my training and everything I learned was to cut the rest of it open. And actually, I think Robin should do the rest of it because you can't hurt this mold now. So we're going to pull it up a little bit higher. And you just want to start in the center, go down in a little bit, and it's not sawing, it's just pulling through. And you do one side and then you do the other, and you just try to finish it all the way to the bottom. You want to give that a try? Okay. And just keep your fingers out of the way of the scalpel. So hit right in the center, go down in a little bit. If you feel like you're pulling really hard, it's because you're probably cutting too much at a time. Yep. Look at you. Good hand skills. So I used to talk about, my mom had 2 aneurysm surgeries in her brain, and I met her surgeon and we got started talking about scalpels and stuff, and he goes, yeah, as a surgeon, the way that they teach you how to cut is they lay down like 20 pieces of tissue paper, and they say cut through 2 layers, cut through 6 layers,
Oh, wow.
cut through 12 layers. And so it was really fascinating talking to him just about how,
Yep.
okay, I
I'm
think
kinda
at this
going-
point, that's okay. But now I think we can do that. But anyway, it made me really, rubber molding, cutting, really gave me a whole new thought about using a scalpel. And
Can I flip that?
yep, and if something goes wrong with this, we just make another one. Something goes wrong with that surgeon, he said that 50% of his patients usually don't make it because aneurysms in the brain. This was 35 years ago, so it's probably different now. And he said, your mom had 2 surgeries and she survived both of them. She's an anomaly. But he also was somebody who liked making jewelry himself, so I thought it was interesting. So now we've got it cut in half. The parting line is going to be about on the back edge. I maybe missed it a little bit there, but it'll be okay. We've got a little bit of extra material, which always happens right here where it fits into the button. But what we're going to do is we're going to put some silicone spray on this, and we're going to shoot it, and then with the wax, and see how it turns out. We may have to adapt a little bit. Sometimes I've had to go back in and cut a relief in these areas so the wax will completely fill in.
That makes sense.
And that might be the case
Yep.
with what is here. But we might as well go try it first. The really nice thing is this thing is stuck together. When you put it together, it's not gonna
Yep.
it's not gonna be offset at all. And that's why I really like the hills and valleys. But the hills and valleys really need to be like the Rocky Mountains, not the Appalachian Mountains. They need to be tall enough that they lock everything in. There we go.
Go for it.
So in the old days, we used to use talcum powder in a sock to be as a mold release, but nowadays we use silicone spray. You really only need to put it on the first time because it just allows the wax to flow through without slowing down. If you find that you're not getting your waxes into your mold, it could be because you need more silicone spray, or it could be that we need to put some of those releases in there. So I've sprayed that up.
Up there, so.
Oh, yeah. And I got our clamp. The clamp, if I had designed the clamp, I would have put it more in the center, but I'm going to set this down here. I'm also going to note that I'm putting it in this way so that the stuff goes in and fills up, and if it doesn't work as well, I'm going to do it the other way. And so it really helps. Okay, so I got to squeeze it a little tight. This is a vacuum pump. I mean, not a vacuum pump, a wax pot. You need to turn the air on. And then what I never know when I'm shooting waxes is what pressure, but somewhere between like 3 and 8. This is a very small piece, so we're probably only going to need to go in at about 3. So I'm going to turn the pressure in. And I'm going to back it off, and the way I drop it. Oh, I hope this isn't messed up. So at about 3. Inside here is the wax at about 155 degrees. We leave it on all the time because it takes about 8 hours for this pot to heat up. We have a little area for stuff that's overflow that will need to go back into the pot. We used to have a can. But anyway, make sure that if any of the wax spills onto the floor or gets dirty, that we don't put it back in the wax pot, because it'll create hardening of the arteries, and then we'll have to clean it all out, and I don't want to do that. So I'm going to get this set up. I'm going to say, okay, 3 pounds of pressure. I'm going to hold it for 6 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've got some wax in there. If it had started running out the side, I would have quit sooner. The other thing about this is that you do need to squeeze the front a little bit, because this is a little far back and it makes this want to open up in the front. So when I worked in industry, I had huge muscles here from squeezing so tight on these. A couple of students have gotten smart and just put a clamp here, which helps if your hands are tired. But I'm going to wait till it freezes so it goes from being glossy to matte, just what it's doing now. I'm going to set it down here. The way to take the molds out without ruining your wax, this one's pretty straightforward, but just lift it up. And you can see that it's going to have some undercuts here. And what I'm noticing is that we've got a couple of holes. Can you see that very well on that?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to try one more time. And I did it this time, I did it with it down this way, right, the last time? So I'm going to flip it over and try it this way.
You had bottom down.
Okay.
That way.
So now we're going to do
Top down.
top
Just
down.
like that. No, no, no. Yep.
Okay.
On the bottom.
Thank you.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I'm not going to squeeze as tight because I could have crushed the mold a little bit. Set it up again. So every mold is going to need different pressure, different time. We just have to figure that out. Once you figure it out, it's nice to write it on your mold so that when you come back to it 3 years from now, you'll remember it. And can you see where the hole is? Is that where that flap was on yours?
I'm not sure what.
Yep.
Yep. Yep, so we're gonna have to burn and weigh. This shows it really well here.
Yep.
See how that flap's gotten in the way?
Yes.
So when I break something loose, what I like to do is I like to break the sprue loose first, and then I just like to squeeze and roll. And then this just usually pops them right out. But yeah, we're gonna have to fix this. Cutting rubber is difficult, so what I like to use is a hot tool and burn it back. Okay. And it just creeped under where it wasn't completely soldered down, but we can fix that.
Oh, I see what's happening.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to turn the air pressure off for now because we're going to fixtures, back it off. And I'm going to turn it off over here. If you guys come over and you need to use this and you feel like you need re-instructed, just call us over. Because there is a rubber diaphragm in here, and if you leave the pressure on, somebody turns this pressure on, it's going to blow the rubber diaphragm, kind of like our torches.